Greetings, quantumly curious humans, and welcome to another episode of Impact Quantum. Today's journey takes us deep into the strange and fascinating realm where physics, artificial intelligence, and entrepreneurial grit all collide. Our guest is Henning Dekant, co-founder of AQB Net, whose path from physicist to AI innovator to quantum entrepreneur is as winding as a qubit's probability curve. We'll explore how the quantum landscape has shifted from the early days of D-wave rumors and IBM experiments to today's hybrid systems, where classical and quantum resources team up for breakthroughs. Along the way, we'll tackle why quantum machine learning's hype fizzled, for now, how new approaches are bringing us closer to real-world quantum advantage, and what this all means for the next wave of material science, finance, and beyond. So settle in, no lab coat required, as we decode the present and peer into the future of quantum innovation, one superposition at a time.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging industry and field of quantum computers. Quantum computing, and the ecosystem that's going to come with that, where you don't really need to have a PhD or be a particle physicist or even stay at a Holiday Inn last night. You just have to be curious. And with that in mind, I have the most quantum curious person I know with me, as always. How's it going, Candice?
It's great. Thank you, Frank. I'm really, really excited about today.
Cool. Me too. We've had a pretty good run. This is I was going through, and this is going to be show 20 of season 3.
That's fantastic.
Which makes this the largest number of episodes in a season of Impact Quantum. And we have also been rated the top quantum computing podcast by FeedSpot. So
yeah, it's such an honor. It's really such an honor to be recognized, to know that people are resonating with being quantum curious. So no, I love that. I love when you told me about that from FeedSpot.
Cool. So who we got speaking to us today, Candice?
Today we have Henning Dekant. He is the co-founder of AQB Net. And he is very excited about the quantum space. And he's looking forward to talking with us today. Hi,
Cool.
Henning. How are you?
Hi. Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing great so far.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your company. You're a co-founder,
yeah.
so you're obviously an entrepreneur. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of a curious journey. We actually started with an incubator with the Creative Destruction Lab here in Toronto in the quantum stream, which was probably the first ever that an incubator had a focus on quantum computing. So it was really, really early in the days, and D-Wave was really the only commercial player at that point. IBM just got started to releasing their machines to the public. Google was pretty much more or less a rumor at the time. Yeah, I've been obviously dabbling in this for quite some time, but it just turned out that in the end we had to pivot to mostly using artificial intelligence, machine learning. That's basically where we found the market. So right now my focus on quantum is mostly just driven by a personal interest. It's not really the focus of the company anymore. What we've been really interested in at the time, and still very interested in, is quantum machine learning. And although there's a huge potential there, obviously the LLM revolution that we got in AI completely overshadowed and took away the kind of the impact that you would expect from quantum on AI, because everybody now thinks, oh, look at these models, they're already so smart. You know, what can quantum actually add to it? And I think we have to go through a full hype cycle in the AI world first, where we can still kind of like see the beginning of it now, that people realize, hang on a second, yeah, these things sound really great. They're very convincing. It feels like there's an actual intelligence there, but then they still just keep making these really stupid mistakes. And I think people have to understand first limitations of where we're at in the current AI cycle before really quantum machine learning is going to make a comeback, because people realize, hang on, what we currently have with our current hardware is still going to have some very fundamental limitations, and we still need more computational power in the end to overcome that. So I think while the focus is going to come back to that, at this point in the quantum circle, we are very, very early where basically just people are looking for anything with our current hardware that can give them an edge. So we're just very, very early still in the quantum cycle. And yeah, the hype for quantum machine learning that was originally there, that has been completely evaporated. So that certainly was all the companies that were focusing on that. Kind of that timing, they kind of got caught on the wrong foot there.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so I was thinking, so what first sparked your interest in quantum computing?
Right.
And how did that lead you to the company that you co-founded, or your particular interest you have right now?
Well, my background is physics, so I have a master's in physics, and then I got myself an MBA later, and unfortunately, then kind of got sidetracked. Well, unfortunately, not really unfortunate if you think about it, but I got sidetracked, as many in the STEM field, into doing IT for most of my professional life. And actually, it started already early on in my master's thesis. Back then, people were already dabbling with artificial neural networks, and the hardware obviously was not near where it is now in terms of making real breakthroughs in that area. So people were focusing on, well, how can we get these things to train better and faster with the limited hardware we have at the time. And so I was actually looking at learning algorithms, improving backpropagation for artificial neural networks, because there's this overlap between the modeling of some physics with neural networks, which incidentally is why the Physics Nobel Prize went to AI, because there's this connection with Hopfield networks and the Ising model, which is really what the D-Wave machine is implementing. So that's how, as a physics student, I kind of got sidetracked into this whole AI machine learning field very early on. And then most of my personal life was really working with data and data science, and just pushing the envelope of what you can do in terms of understanding patterns and using the machine learning capabilities you have to better have analytics and business insights. So that's really where my professional background was. But then when D-Wave started, it obviously was very exciting to see some company doing actual real quantum processes on a chip, and claiming, this is actually something you can use to solve real life problems faster. So when those guys started doing it, I was very excited about it and started blogging about it. And then just following the industry and then seeing the opportunities there, that's how I then basically made the decision, let's try to get something going in this space. And with the Creative Destruction Lab here in Toronto had this quantum stream. It was just an actual fit. So that's when I made the plunge. So yeah, that's my quantum journey in a nutshell here. And as I mentioned before we started recording, I think really at an inflection point now. It's getting really exciting again, because we had this interesting dynamic for a long time between I think mostly IBM and Google, where one company comes out and makes a huge claim, we finally have quantum supremacy, and then IBM usually is the one kind of slapping them down and saying, hey, wait a second, we can still do this on a real traditional cluster computer, doing some supercomputing here and some smart algorithms. We can still push the envelope and get further. And that dynamic has been playing out for quite some time. And then you always have like the typical hype announcements again, Microsoft being now number one really in terms of going out there and making some claims that are kind of yeah, out there in terms of now we have created this new topological state, and have basically an anion, a particle that doesn't really exist in nature, but we have it on our chip, and we can do things that nobody else can do. But it's extremely early on again, and so you have these hype news breaks, and then you have people slapping it down. But always pay attention when D-Wave comes out again or something, and they of course now earlier in this year said, well, we can have demonstrated quantum advantage, same dynamic again, of course, that they come out and say it, and then people are skeptical and say, well, no, we can still push the envelope here, but it's getting to the point where we have now people doing things on these early systems, where you really find that they get results that you could probably not reproduce easily on a classical hardware. And the funny thing is that where this is happening right now is really in the physics community. And so there are certain research papers and news items that are kind of flying under the radar now, because they're not really hyped, because they're just reporting what they do and what they can do with these chips. One of them actually used the Google chip to simulate solid state physics, it's a really interesting phenomenon that's even theoretically just has been out there for a couple of years, and I don't want to go into the details, because first of all, although I have a physics degree, I don't really fully understand them myself. But second of all, I don't think it's necessarily something that will appeal to your audience if I try to go too far into the details here. But being able basically to simulate a lattice, a crystal lattice on these chips, and have them in superposition of all sorts of crystal defects that they introduce artificially, you can find that there are states where basically you get energy localized and it doesn't dissipate, that's called actually I have to look it up. Yeah, disorder-free localization, DFL, if anybody wants to look it up. It's theoretically just something that has been looked at for a couple of years, and it plays a role in all sorts of physics. And to be able to actually get these kind of states on a quantum chip, to have these kind of physics kind of play out, I mean, that is really new quality. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of stuff before. And similar things happening now in high energy physics. It was, I believe, IonQ did that. Look at my notes here again. Yeah, University of Washington and IonQ. So they also do simulations of physical states that we don't have in nature, but you can implement them on these chips and then do experiments on them. So that's really crazy stuff. That's you couldn't have been able to do that a couple of years ago.
Well, I think you said a lot, and there's a lot to unpack there. I think one is Microsoft has made some pretty big claims with the Majorana chip. People make fun of them for that.
Right.
But I think, I think it's too soon to discount entirely, and I think that maybe time will prove them right. But I think that is an underlying thing that Candice and I were talking to another startup founder, and it's came up more than once that whenever they announce a new breakthrough, one of their biggest fears of these startup founders is being mocked or like smacked down by these researchers. Candice is nodding because we've seen this more than once. And I find that interesting. And I guess you had this in the early days of AI, but I don't know. I think AI researchers could stand to be a little more humble than what they are, but that's a story for another day. But so there's a lot to unpack there, and but I mean, I think that I laughed when you mentioned Microsoft and kind of what they did, because that they are now the favorite quantum innovators to be mocked at now. Like that's kind of the thing. But I think you're going to have this. I think this is a normal growing pain when a technology gets out of the lab and gets into, industry, and you're going to have a lot of people who are still in the lab saying, well, that really won't work. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when mainframers would mock what they called, what did they call PCs originally? Try to call them microcomputers.
Yeah, microcomputers. Yeah,
something like that. Like, and it was one of those things where, just because people. You ever see the Muppet Show? I know this is really, really random, but in the Muppet Show, they had the two old guys sitting up there that would make fun of everything. Like, I think in every industry goes through that phase.
But I also think that because Microsoft came out and because they got smacked down so hard, but all of a sudden after that, like it just seemed that the gates were opened, and you just started hearing about so much more innovation from a multitude of countries that it was kind of like someone had to take the first step. They got to have somebody at the front of the battle. You know what I mean? And they were big enough that they could take all the naysayers, but it also seemed to kind of, I don't know, it just excited the industry in a way that, so much more has happened since that announcement. I feel like, the past not even 6 months have been just explosive with new invention, right?
It's been explosive up and down, wouldn't you say? Like, because Willow came out, Google and Willow came out kind of like December-ish. And then Jensen at CES, like literally the first week of the year, was like, nah. And then it, like, I don't know. It's been an interesting ride. Not to cut you off. I'm sorry.
You go ahead, Henning. What do you think?
I think it's a little bit, like there's no such thing as bad news. Anytime you get quantum computing into the news cycle, even if it's like something that's rather overhyped, like Microsoft, it gets people to look it up and to pay attention again. And then that opens kind of an opportunity for these other smaller companies to, time their press releases and get attention that they would otherwise not really get. They're kind of like riding the coattails here a little bit. And the real progress at this point is not coming from Microsoft because they're just way early in the cycle of their architecture. Theoretically, the architecture is very promising, but it's just such an enormous amount of progress. It has to happen on different fronts at the same time for these kind of topological chips to actually work out, that before they actually get some reasonable amount of qubits to actually build gates with it, that's several years out, at least. And on the other hand, you have in the here and now, you have these near-term devices, Google chips and IBM chips, and D-Wave as well, and all the smaller players that are using ions or neutral atoms to build quantum simulators. And you can do some amazing stuff with that. And to me, really, it is kind of funny that because things have been overhyped and then there's a smackdown, there's this dynamic, that the smaller guys are doing really interesting things right now, where I basically can say, this is stuff that you probably couldn't really do on a classical computer anymore. It's kind of like they don't get as much attention as they really would deserve to getting, because it's just obscure physics that they are simulating, and it gets physicists excited, but it doesn't translate to an immediate problem domain, that a business guy can understand, like all the optimization procedures that are typically talked up whenever you talk about quantum computing. So I found it was kind of curious that IBM just came out now with a paper that they actually authored with a smaller European outfit that's doing neutral atom quantum computing, basically saying, okay, this is how we need to organize as a community to understand if we actually achieve a real quantum advantage. So there's a nice little blog post that's actually quite accessible if you want to read up on it, that IBM published, and then there's a white paper that's obviously more technical. But that is, I think, an extremely important initiative right now because IBM has always been kind of like the good guy in the room, kind of like saying, okay, we shouldn't overhype this. We should have a very well-engineered approach to rolling out these systems and really have metrics along the way. I think it's just kind of IBM culture, right? I mean, this old engineering company that didn't come out of Silicon Valley, that has just a much more credibility in that respect when it comes to engineering as keeping it real. So hopefully that white paper really is going to carry some weight and it's going to resonate with the scientific community as well, because as you said, it's mostly the scientists who, by their nature, of course, are always very skeptical about outrageous claims, and also have no, yeah, I mean, they have no stake in the game to hype something up. So the dynamic typically has been like between D-Wave and Scott Aronson. You've got company announcements, press releases, people trying to build excitement, and then you have a scientist coming there saying, hang on a second, So by IBM going this route of publishing a white paper and trying to engage the scientific community and get them to agree on certain benchmarks and certain methods of how to determine, do we have actual quantum advantage? I hope we're going to get this settled and get actually a consensus and the message out, maybe IBM hopes by the end of next year, that yes, with our current quantum systems, we have the ability to build systems that are better than what you can do with classical alone. And from my point of view, I mean, it is happening. I've talked to some colleagues in the industry in Germany who are at the forefront of quantum algorithms. They actually just won an award by IBM for being some of the most innovative stuff that they have on their cloud. They basically say, yeah, we can have these Hubo problems, these optimization problems now built on IBM's cloud in a way that you can beat what you can do classically. But again, this has to be validated, it has to be confirmed, and you need to have this consensus built, because otherwise we're just stuck in this hype cycle. People saying they can do something better than classical, and others saying, oh no, it's not really there yet. And there needs to be this consolidated understanding. It's like, okay, yeah, we have this near-term hardware. It doesn't fit everything yet. But you know what? There are classes now of problems where you can do things you can't do and you can't touch with any supercomputer. And I think that's going to be a huge catalyst if that message gets out by the end of next year. I really hope it does.
So from your perspective, there's all this hype. People are coming out with things that, aren't hype, but could actually happen. What's one major misconception that the public or even technologists have about quantum computing today?
I think the biggest misconception is that everybody thinks you need to have these error-corrected, fully controlled quantum computing systems before you actually get to the point where you have commercial viability. And that is just a notion that if that would stuck, it'll kill the industry, really, because getting to quantum advantage is going to be an evolutionary process. There's going to be a lot of hybrid systems that are combining quantum resources with classical computing, where you can push the envelope and can do things we can't do classically. And it's not the textbook model of a quantum computer that theorists taught and teach, because that's a model that's theoretically easy to understand, and you can make theoretical breakthroughs on that end. But quantum reality, where we have annealers and we have qubits that still have decoherence issues, and you can't get the kind of gate depth that you need for the famous quantum algorithms like Shor's algorithm, etc. You can't build that on the current hardware, but you can do things with this hardware already with these quantum resources that can't be done classically. And it's a very different paradigm than what the theorists like and have been obviously been pioneering for a long time. But we don't have to get to the point of perfection with quantum computers to make them useful. And I think if that message gets out and is confirmed really and gets the buy-in of the scientific community, that's going to be a huge boost for the industry. And what I've seen happening now is really people combining quantum resources in a way that hasn't been done a couple of years ago, because I mean, obviously we didn't have that many, but you now have these companies like Kipo Quantum Computing that combine D-Wave and IBM chips and get very interesting results by doing that. For instance, D-Wave, as I said, they already came out in March saying we can do things now on our machine that's better than anything classically. But the funny thing is that if you combine it with an IBM chip and you use an IBM chip to find a configuration for the D-Wave machine so that it doesn't get stuck in the barren plateau when it looks for the optimization, you can get much better results with far less time spent on doing it than by just using a D-Wave machine alone or just using IBM chip alone. So this kind of sequential quantum computing that's happening now is another thing where basically you can leverage the strength of different quantum ecosystems and push the envelope. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see going forward that really is going to give us the ability to get results from these quantum systems in the here and now that will be really game-changing in terms of what you can do with hardware. But again, I mean, the word has to go out, right? I mean, it's like it's no longer just a toy. And if you want to get in early and take advantage of this, you have to invest in the current ecosystem and get people to actually be trained on these platforms. And you can't just wait until you have the perfect computer either handed to you by Microsoft or by Google, where you can run these wonderful algorithms that have been dreamt up in the ivory tower many years ago. If you do that, you're going to miss out. The quantum advantage is going to be there, and it's going to be many, many years before you get a fully error-corrected quantum computing chip. So if you basically just stand on the sideline, that progress is going to pass you by.
Interesting. So where do you see the next innovation? Like what? Well, what do you think is next? Like, I know it's hard to predict, but like, what do you think is going to be the next aha moment?
Yeah, I think this to me, what was done with the sequential quantum computing was a bit of an aha moment, because it's like, oh, look at this. You can actually take these different systems and although you're transporting information classically from an IBM chip to a D-Wave, still by combining them, you get more out of them. It's bigger than the sum of its parts, right? So that kind of keeps you thinking, right? I mean, well, how would that actually maybe play out if you could connect these different quantum resources and approaches in the same system in terms of you could actually link them coherently and you could move quantum information between them. And there was one news item coming from Boston University just last week, or was it this week, or was just very recent, where they integrated everything on a chip basically to move coherent information, quantum information, from one system to another. And it's kind of funny because I had the same question asked, I put to Jody Rose from D-Wave when it was still with D-Wave many years ago. My question basically was like, why do you get every information from your quantum chip classically through these huge cables, and you always see these pictures of quantum computing chips? You have like this inverse chandelier. Everything comes down to like the end where the quantum chip sits, and you have all these cables. And the reason why this thing looks like an inverse chandelier is because you have all these filters in between, trying to clean the signal and making sure that you don't carry noise along the wires. And so my question back then was, well, why don't you use an optical interconnect and you don't get this problem with the noise? And he thought it was an interesting idea way back then, but obviously not something that the EVF would be able to pick up at the time. But basically what this Boston University project did is they put all that now on a chip so that you can actually connect different quantum resources in these huge fridges that they're operating, and they could talk to each other. And I think University in Munich is trying to actually experiment with that approach. So you basically going to be able to have these different systems, some that do annealing, some that implement the qubits and gates architecture, like an IBM chip does, and have them talk to each other in the same dilution refrigerator and exchange coherent information. So I think that's something that's going to be very interesting to observe, and possibly could be the next big thing in terms of hardware. But I think in terms of software, really, yeah, what we just now have seen with the sequential approach, I think we're going to see that much more different hardware vendors cooperating and using the strengths of their various systems to compensate weaknesses of others. And I think companies that understand all the different systems, that have experience on different systems, are going to be the ones really pushing the envelope here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, at Impact Quantum, we're really interested in accessibility. What advice would you give to young professionals or curious minds who want to contribute to the quantum future?
Unfortunately, there's lots of material out there now, and really good cloud platforms that you can start with playing around with using. Well, mostly at this point, still emulators, but also some vendors give you access to lower tier chips to have actual quantum resources that you can play with. So yeah, signing up to an online platform. I mean, IBM obviously still has their cloud platform. Then this company in Germany, they have a platform called Planck. They can also get a free account, and there's lots and lots of tutorials on there, so you can build up your understanding and your intuition about how quantum resources work and how they're very, very different from classical computing. So in that sense, it's also fortunately a very different world than when I started writing about quantum computing. Yeah, but the one thing that I think people need to be careful about is to not fall into a trap of thinking that the one approach they learn first is the only one that matters. So typically you will still start learning about quantum gates and how to write these classical quantum computing algorithms. And one thing to just realize as you build these kind of things out is to keep an eye on of how many gates do you actually use for these various algorithms, and what's the gate depth, and at what point how many qubits do you actually need to run this, and you will see that, with the typical classical examples, Provost algorithm, etc., all these kind of early algorithms, that the resource footprint is just huge. So then really it's once you realize that and you understand where the theory comes from, then mapping this into something that the current hardware can do, that's really where the challenge is. And that's a very different kind of problem than what you just learn on the theoretical side for quantum computing. So I think, yeah, platforms and tutorials that kind of like stress what's doable with current hardware is probably where you want to focus on at that point. So don't get stuck in the theory side, I guess is my advice.
So how do you explain to people what you do outside of your field? Because we know that quantum computing can feel really abstract. So I'd like to know how you explain what you do to people, what you do to people who are outside of the field.
Well, it's the software that we worked on is essentially you can think about it as a compiler, and compiler building really is a big issue now in this emergent hardware field, because every hardware that you have has different capabilities in terms of what they can implement. If you compare it to a classical computer, it's really just the architecture, the address spaces, etc., that differ between different digital computers. But the underlying model is all the same, right? I mean, you have Boolean logic, you have binary logic, and while most quantum hardware systems at least have a qubit as the smallest common denominator, even that is not necessarily a given. There are approaches where you have states that encode more than two values. So in the digital realm, it would be like, okay, you're not only working with 0 and 1, but let's say you're having three values that we represent, and so we would have a tertiary logic instead of a binary one. And in the quantum world, you can actually have very, very many quantum states at the same time. And a company in Toronto, actually, trying to do their optical approach, you work with these higher order quantum states. So you don't even have necessarily the common denominator that everything reduces to qubit in the end. But even if you just look at the chips that are implementing qubits, they again don't agree on what kind of gates they can actually implement. So there are different universal gate sets, and each of them, as the name applies, universal means you can do every quantum algorithm really with those gates, but there are a subset of all the possible gates that you can implement. So if every chip architecture basically is very, very different in terms of what they can do, and then obviously you don't have error correction on these early hardware systems. So you basically, everything that needs to be error corrected, you have to do manually as well. So compilers that can optimize that are again another layer that you need there, such as a software layer. So there's an enormous amount of stuff that has to happen in software before you can actually talk to a quantum chip. So that's really kind of the stuff that we've been looking at and working on the lower level. And on the other end, the quantum machine learning stuff, that's where we are mostly interested in what's called Bayesian networks, and how they can be mapped into the D-Wave architecture. But yeah, it will get a bit technical here if I go into all the details, but to make matters short, is basically you can map these structures into a Markov chain that then can be implemented on a D-Wave or a device kind of a quantum annealing architecture. And so you can do training of these Bayesian networks on quantum architecture. And the reason why these Bayesian networks are interesting, just going back to my earlier complaint about the current state of AI, is that these things are completely transparent. You can really understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then they don't have a black box problem. But unlike artificial neural networks, they're much more difficult to train. And as you know, I mean, you already have like these companies building basically power plants now to drive the training of LLMs. So even our current architecture is very expensive to train. So if you have an architecture that's even levels of more complexity and expensive training that you require for Bayesian networks, you can imagine that that's not something that you can do in a classical environment, really. So there's a price to be paid in terms of computational complexity if you want to have transparency in your AI models, and I think that's where quantum eventually is going to have a huge impact on artificial intelligence.
Interesting.
Okay. I think that's good advice.
I think so.
So let me ask you this. What kind of real world problems do you believe quantum computing is going to solve first? And why?
Yeah, it depends on your definition of real world problem, right? So as I said, I mean, in terms of simulating quantum physics, I think we're almost there at this point. You're at the point where you basically can set up an experiment and have it run on a quantum hardware, and you're simulating a quantum system, and you can get experimental results out of this, just like you would get out of a lab experiment, and to basically have experimental physics now become a quantum computing programming exercise. I mean, that's pretty real world impact right there, I think. But again, that's when I put my physics hat on, right? The impact of these kind of models are not going to translate right away into products for everyday use. But I really think that in terms of material research and chemistry, that's where we're going to see the first real world impact. We're just going to be able to understand things in the chemistry space and the material space that would be very, very difficult to attain by just experiment alone or modeling it on a classical computer. And if you think about our entire classical compute ecosystem has been basically leveraging quantum properties of silicon, essentially. So you're doping silicon, and you can get these band structures, and you have a transistor, and then you can get this thing ever smaller. And it's really just one particular solid state physics effect in silicon that gave us all this electronics, all this amazing technology that we have now. So being able to model solid state physics on quantum chips and get a better understanding and how you can engineer quantum effects directly into material, I think that's going to be a huge impact. I think it's going to be a technology enabler above and beyond what we can mention even right now. But it's just this enabling technology that now physicists get to play with it and can do these kind of simulations. And that's just going to be resulting in papers that to a layperson are going to be completely inaccessible. It's like the CFL effect. Okay, so we have localized energy, it doesn't dissipate. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean a whole lot to any layperson or even expert at first, but I mean, we may get to the point where we have materials that can only conduct heat into one direction. So that would be engineering wise, and that's an incredible feat, right? And again, I think that the kind of engineering we're going to see coming out of it is going to be next level. And that's, I think, we're going to have the first impact. And then obviously, I mean, what people are selling and just because there's financial incentive is going to be optimization problems. I mean, obviously, the financial industry has a lot of spare money to really throw around. So I think just like with machine learning, once you get the actual real world advantage in running certain optimizations on a quantum chip and running faster on a quantum chip, the financial industry is going to pour a lot of money into this. So yeah, that's probably the next thing. I think you can always count on the greed and when it comes to trading and stock arbitrage and these kind of things to make a lot of money available. Yeah, that's probably going to be in field in the financial industry. As soon as we have a quantum advantage, these guys are going to take advantage of the quantum advantage to find better ways to predict stocks, or to do this arbitrage trading, etc. But obviously, what I'm interested about, or most excited about, is the engineering part.
Okay.
Excellent. So where can folks find out more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm actually probably going to restart my blogging exercise about quantum computing. So I actually, because it was D-Wave originally that inspired me to start doing that, I called my domain Wave Watching. So wavewatching.net, you will find my blog. Currently, it's just old stuff there, but because of all this interesting development that's happening right now, I think it's time for me to restart it. This era of getting to an actual quantum advantage it's just very, very exciting, and again, I think people don't realize that's what's happening right now. So yeah, I'm going to start writing about it again.
Cool.
That sounds great. And if you ever want to send anything over for us to put up on Impact Quantum, absolutely send us any of your articles. We can help disseminate and promulgate the information. But
Yeah,
this has been really great.
And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Candice. I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. We are working on the blog portion of impactquantum.com to be up to date on news and things like that. So we'll definitely add, I don't know if they still call it a blog roll. I don't know if you remember back in the day they had blog rolls. We'll definitely add your link when you send it to us. Any parting thoughts, Candice?
No, I really enjoyed it. I think that you've given great advice to people who are interested in getting involved in quantum. I think you've expressed how exciting you think the ecosystem is right now and how it's just kind of blowing up with innovation. You know what? We'd love to have you back. And then, and then we can touch base on what has changed in the ecosystem between now and then when we speak to you again. We really love what you're doing, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Awesome. And we'll let our AI finish the show.
And that, dear listeners, concludes another thrilling episode of Impact Quantum. Proof that you can, in fact, have your brain stretched to the limits of comprehension without pulling a single muscle. A huge thank you to Henning Dekant for taking us on a guided tour of the quantum frontier, where the hype cycles are dizzying, the breakthroughs are genuine, and the acronyms, plentiful. If you enjoyed this episode, do share it with a friend, preferably one who claims they don't get quantum computing. You'll either enlighten them or confuse them gloriously. Either way, a win. Until next time, keep your bits entangled, your superpositions stable. And remember, in quantum computing, as in life, collapse happens when you least expect it. Cheers.